Welcome to the Be the Light podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Bordeaux, and each week we will introduce a new guest in hopes to brighten your life. Today I have the pleasure of chatting with Ryan Martin. Who is Ryan Martin? Ryan Martin is a mental health advocate who somehow rode his bike across Canada in support of mental health awareness. He has raised $185,000. Let's find out how and why he decided to take on this journey. Ryan Martin, welcome to the show, buddy. How are you today?
I'm good, Jesse. It's great to meet, I guess, over video.
Yeah, I know. It's always a sort of strange meeting on video, but I mean, it's a new norm now. So
Totally.
thank you so much for taking the time. I'm pumped to have you here.
It's kind of funny because if it wasn't, in person, it probably would have been harder to make it happen. So it's kind of nice that it's on video because it's just so easy to organize, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we're all busy now, so I do appreciate you taking the time and chatting with me today. I'm really excited to get into the details of your incredible achievement, having cycled across Canada to shine a light on mental health.
Totally.
But before we get into those details, I sort of want to take it back and maybe talk a bit about the moment you realized that mental health challenges were going to be a part of your life. Were you in high school at the time, or?
It was fairly gradual, like coming to my awareness that it was an issue. But as time went on, like high school was very much just dismissed and brushed off. And then when I got to university, that's when I started experiencing, like, I guess, a little bit more like well-known symptoms of mental struggles. Like it was, the anxiety, like the helplessness, stuff like that. But when I finally realized it was going to be a huge part of my life was that I realized that it just wasn't going away. And so at that point, and that took a while to realize that, like, it's up to me to actually, like, change something here, or else I'm just kind of going on a bit of a ruddy path. So yeah, when I realized that it was not going away, then it's like, okay, this is a huge part of me. It's not me, but, like, I gotta acknowledge and respect what's going on and start doing stuff about it. And when that happened, that's when a lot of good change starts happening.
Yeah. I think the acknowledgement is a big step, and when you're in high school, there's a lot going on. You're playing sports, you're busy, right? You're in school all day, and then usually after school, you're either playing sports and/or hanging out with friends. So you don't really have time to sit back and acknowledge how you're feeling.
Totally.
Right? And then I think, yeah. And, and then once you get into college and stuff, and, you mature and you start, thinking about life and the future, and things start slowing down a bit around you. Then things kind of start slowing down up here, and you kind of, your thoughts catch up with you, and then you can sort of acknowledge, okay, this is how I'm feeling, right? Well, why am I this anxious? Why is my heart racing right now? Is that something that you dealt with, like that anxiety, that physical anxiety, or was it more like downs from, like depression? Like what were some of the things that you dealt with specifically?
Yeah. I mean, it was just always changing. That was, like, the most, like, stressful, kind of frustrating part of it, is, like, I could just, every time my mood would change, it'd feel like the newest, craziest, worst, state. And I know that's not just unique to myself, but yeah, like, I would have periods of just intense social anxiety where I knew I was a personable, outgoing person, had lots of friends, great friendships. People knew me as social, but I would be, like, crippled by social anxiety and just be totally in my head. And then, the other times when I would be out, in university, partying, and I would go to bed at like 4 a.m. and then the next couple of days I'd be absolutely depressed. And that also happened when I wouldn't be going out and having fun with my friends. And so the variety of those states I was in was just so wide. It's just like, it never seems like it's the same one. And so at that time, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it never felt like when I'd be experiencing something, it's like, oh, right, I've been here before. It just always felt so new, so intense. And not all, like, I wasn't, struggling 24/7, but it was a large portion of the time. And I think at that point, like that's one of the biggest struggles. Like at that phase of a mental health journey, it's just like you don't even know where you're at, you know.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
I guess compared to now, I still feel that sense of novelty when I feel something, but it's like no. I'm like a little bit more familiar with this, and I mean because I'm that, I can just calm down a little bit and then start trying to take care of myself. But
Yeah.
yeah, at that point, it was just a huge array of mental states. But even on that note, like over time they start getting compartmentalized. It's like, okay, like these are like the anxiety type of states, these are the depressive type of states, these are the overwhelmed type of states, these are the crisis type of states. Not that they're all treated the same way, like managed with tools and such, but it's just getting more familiar with our wellness and our moods.
Yeah.
And
And
I was so bad at it back then.
yeah. Oh, and I mean, that's the toughest part, right? Is like you said, acknowledging and then recognizing your, those different states, like you mentioned, right? Because most people wake up and, they have a goal to just get through the day. Let's go to work. Let's get through the day, come home, watch TV and go to bed. Right. And, sometimes you just do that and you do that until you hit a wall and then you just had no clue there was something that was wrong and that was bothering you. Whereas I think it takes a lot of strength to just acknowledge like, okay, something's not right.
Mm,
Maybe I should have that stability, right? That same, that those same emotions, every day over and over, right? Just that stability maybe that you're looking for.
totally.
Did you find, I know you're open about sharing this, which is amazing. And our listeners and viewers will definitely appreciate it. And, they'll definitely use this as resources. So, did you find at the time, like your friends that were around you, were you able to open up to them quite easily, or was that a challenge for you as well?
No, I wasn't. I really struggled with that, and it was just so funny. Like I had such great friendships, but I just couldn't. I didn't know what to say. It's so hard to communicate how you're feeling when it's that like early on. Like for me, when it was that early on in the journey of like what the heck is even going on in my head, and then how do you use words to explain to someone? And it was just I never felt like safe to do it with my friends. Even like I encountered a few times with my parents where they didn't respond the way that I needed when I brought stuff up, and
Yeah.
they didn't know what I needed. So it's not their fault. It's just lack of education.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you have those little like sprinkles of experiences and they don't go well. And it's like, okay, like I've now lost trust in people and sharing how I'm feeling. But how I truly like opened up was I actually just at one point, like a couple months after university, I had like a huge breakdown with two of my buddies in the car and we were driving home and we pulled over into a parking lot in Fergus actually. And
Yeah.
I just completely broke down, like bawling my eyes out. And I was like, look, like I have been hurting so much for so long and I need your help. And, we did like the big bro hug and all that stuff. And then I went home, told my parents, went to the hospital, told more friends. And that's kind of how it happened. Unfortunately for me, it took like an absolute meltdown to really get it out there. But as much as that was, I don't regret it happening that way because it was just kind of like rip the band-aid off. Although there was many more times of shame and hiding things after that, like that was a really good initial way to be like, okay, like I'm going to tell a couple people how I'm really, really feeling. No, nothing covered up.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean that again, that's the challenging part is to be vulnerable enough to open up, and even if it's to your close friends, right? I mean, it's easy to have conversations about everything else, but when it comes to something, especially for men too, right?
Totally.
Um, I think when there's that ego and
Why do
you
you
want
think
to.
it's hard to say anything?
I mean, I think we're just afraid of being judged, maybe. Fear of judgment, fear that they'll look at you differently, fear that they'll treat you differently. Um, you know, for me personally, I found that, I didn't want to be treated with sympathy, and, but I'm with you, right? I agree. Like when I opened up and shared my story or, I tell people, hey, listen, like I've been through this, like I have friends or even, just people that I know that, they still don't know things that I've gone through. And they just look at me as this positive guy that, has it all. That's the way that they perceive you, right? That's the way, because people look on Instagram or on social media and they just see the highlight reel of each other, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's why like on social media, I try to, be honest and vulnerable. And and share some of my struggles, right? Just like you did to your friends that day in Fergus, and you opened up and, you cried and you took that chance, right? And, I think that when people see, people that are, successful and that, look a certain way or, um, you know, open up, then
Mm-hmm.
it's encouraging, right? So I mean,
Totally.
I think everybody, whether it's you're going through something extremely challenging, or even if it's something that you might think is stupid, right? That's, oh, this is not worth being upset over, right? There's no like time or special time in your life to share your story. I think everybody has a story to share, and there's not going to be a perfect time to share your story, right? I think it's important to open up, and that's why I appreciate the fact that you've dedicated your life now to being a mental health advocate, and you sort of turn your struggles into a passion, and then your passion into a career. That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Right? And
No, I first of all, I appreciate that. And I was thinking when we were talking about why is it so hard to share how we're feeling. It's like what came up for me when you were speaking was that
yeah,
like I was so concerned that if I opened up, it would change the way people thought of me. But what I thought people thought of me was how I thought they thought of me in my head, not what they actually thought. So me deciding not to do something because of their way of thinking of me is changing is only based on how I think they think of me, and that
exactly,
could not even be
exactly.
it could not even be accurate. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
something I never even really thought about that until now.
That's good, and that's why it's important to keep the conversation going, right?
Yeah,
And to have these
like
types of discussions. So,
we never know what people are thinking about us. Hopefully, good
hey,
things.
yeah, real men talk about mental health, right?
Yes, of course.
So yeah, now that we have a better understanding of some of the challenges that you went through, I definitely want to get into the details of your incredible journey.
Yeah.
Right. So at what moment did you decide that you were just going to embark on this journey across Canada? I'm so interested in learning about this.
Um. So I've always wanted to do it. I talked about it for years, but it was kind of like a bit of a fantasy, I guess. And not I guess it was a fantasy.
Yeah.
And then when I had been more addressing my struggles after school, I got diagnosed with a form of bipolar disorder at the time, and I was on bipolar medication. It was an absolute grind. Just nothing was really going my way at that point. And after about like 8, 9, 10 months, I had like a few days in a row that were pretty good, like mentally, just like fairly. I was like, oh, okay, like this is normally it doesn't last that long. And I just had this moment of like, throughout those few days, I was like, I need to share me in a bigger way. Like, I need to share my truth, what's going on. And I'd already done that with like friends and family and Facebook and stuff like that. But when I got
Yeah.
diagnosed with bipolar, it was like a completely different world because that was the worst case scenario for me to get that diagnosis in terms of like a confidence and stigma piece. And so I said, okay, like I want to like really do this again on a huge way and nothing to hide. And so that, and then I was like, okay, I have some money. I've been working. I can afford to do this bike ride. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do the bike ride. I'm gonna share my story for myself, and I'm gonna try and help people. And those three kind of coming together, like financially, want to share my story and do the bike ride. As it was just good timing for me. I'd been working for about a year, and I was like, all right, let's do this. And so
Yeah.
you can only do it very small window of the year because it gets too cold on the you know in
Oh, I
BC
can
or
imagine.
Newfoundland. So you got to pretty much start in May and finish before September, like early September. And so, yeah, honestly, I mean, it's, we could have an entire conversation about this, but I would say that
Yeah.
it was the, it's, as many things, like it played a huge role in changing the trajectory of my wellness and how I approach myself. And it was just life changing. I mean, I don't really want to use that term because it can be cliche, but it was like
Oh, I would imagine it's a huge endeavor, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's no, minuscule task. So
it,
I want to
it
do
was
I do want to get into details, right?
okay, okay,
I do because I am interested about this because
okay.
like I've cycled, I've entered the Ride for Heart in Toronto and done like 75 kilometers, and that for me is a challenge, right? People that do 75 kilometers and raise some money, right? And usually that's a big accomplishment. So the fact that you decided to get on a bike and travel across the entire country, right? Even though it was 2 years ago, this is something that we need to remember for a long time.
Oh no, no,
Right?
totally.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right?
I
So you get on an airplane and you fly out west.
I flew to Vancouver, then I flew to Nanaimo, and then I drove to Tofino, which was the farthest west I wanted to go. Like you can BC goes further west than that, but like not a ton, and it's not civilized really. Maybe like yeah, there's not a ton else that's
Wow.
further west than that in the provinces. And
Wow.
so I did my bike in like the third week of May, and then hit the road. So it was pretty much 100, 110, like 150 kilometers every day. And started off in BC, which for me, being a big skier, like growing up, like I got to go skiing out there. You fly over the mountains, but then when you bike through the mountains, it's completely different. It's you just I had the deepest sense of adventure, and it was so cool because I was in my backyard technically, right? You're in Canada still. I didn't have to go to Antarctica to get an adventure. Like it was,
Yeah.
I felt at home, and
Yeah.
just such an incredible experience. And that was just BC. Like honestly,
Yeah.
before I even jumped on the plane in Toronto to fly out west, I was happy with my experience. I said I could be done right now because we raised like 30 grand at that point. I had shared my story at that point. I had like done a lot of like news stuff. So I knew my story was getting out there. I felt fulfilled. I felt completely fulfilled before I stepped on the plane, did the ride.
Wow.
So as soon as I started biking, it was pretty much just bonus from there.
That's amazing.
Um,
That's motivation, right? And so you knew you had a team behind you, you had people supporting you,
yeah.
and I could only imagine the nerves and the excitement just to embark on such a big challenge. Now, I remember reading you were a couple days in, I believe, and you were out west in BC, and you mentioned that a white truck
Oh
drove
yeah.
past you.
Yes.
Right? Can you tell us about that? So a white truck drives past you, and then you see a hand waving out the window.
Sure.
What was running through your mind at that time?
Well, it was on a fairly remote part of BC. Like it's Highway 1, but no one really uses that highway. They use that highway called the Coquihalla Highway to get up to Kamloops from Vancouver. And so it's not that busy, and it's like very remote. Like there's nothing really going on. There's like one little town over a couple hundred kilometers. And so I got to that town after biking, upriver all day. And I was exhausted. It was like my fifth day in a row from leaving from Tofino, and I went to this convenience store, and I came out and I had kind of like a classic post ride meal for me. It would be like Snickers bar, chocolate milk, whatever, and I just like woofed that down, and then I had a couple of kilometers to get to this really crummy motel. And so as soon as I pulled out of the gas station and turned right onto the highway to keep biking, this pickup truck you're talking about, a huge like dually pickup truck, huge, just like pretty crappy truck to be honest, flew by me and then immediately turned onto the shoulder. And I didn't really think much of it because people were aggressive drivers all the time. 5 days
Yeah.
into it, I already knew that was kind of normal. Anyways, I looked down. This truck had pulled over, and the driver was sticking his hand out the window, waving. And at that point, my girlfriend, when I was in Vancouver, got Cycling Canada for Mental Health printed on my jersey. So I knew people were seeing that message pretty much every time they passed me, unless they weren't paying attention. And so he's waving me over. I'm kind of like waddling up beside him. I get to his door, driver's side door, and it just like flips open, turns open. And I look inside, and he is like leaning against the steering wheel with this gripping the steering wheel, and his head just pushed against like the middle of the steering wheel, and he's not moving, he's not saying anything. But I noticed that the side of his face that I could see, his left side was just totally like flushed and red, and
Wow.
then I didn't like, honestly, it felt like a lifetime. But he looked over at me, and he was just like bawling his eyes out, and again didn't say much for a while. I was just kind of standing there, and he said, finally, I just want to say thank you. thank you for doing this. I've been struggling with PTSD for a really long time, and haven't talked about it. Don't know what to do about it, but I just wanted to say thanks, and gave me $20. And then I didn't say, I feel like I kind of blacked out, but I didn't say much. And then I just I backed away and then closed the door, and he drove away. And I just didn't really hit me until a while after, actually, that I just couldn't believe that, like, where he pulled me over, there's a gas station and nothing else, just all trees and mountains. And this, 2-lane or single-lane highway. And I was like, if someone here in this setting is ready to just break down like that, like, how many people in a city are like that? Like in Toronto, like, like when the population density is higher. It just blew my mind, and was a huge signaler that, like, there's a lot more people out there than we think who are just ready to kind of pop like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's such an incredible story.
Yeah.
And so these things along the way definitely fueled your fire to keep going.
Totally.
When you reach those, those mental struggles, because there was some days where you might have felt like giving up, I'm assuming. Maybe not quite giving up, but days where you were in your head. I know you referred to one day as a crash and burn. And
yeah.
So and your dad joined you on one of the days. Was he with you? Was he riding with you?
He did ride with me, but just going back to that crash and burn thing, because I think it's, I guess, worth talking about.
Okay, so I wasn't sure if it was the same day that your dad joined you.
No, it wasn't. It was actually, that was a different time, but the other one that I crashed and burned was, I was in Quebec, and I had been biking for, like, I left Quebec City. I spent a couple of days there, and then it was like super humid. I was on my own, and when I got past Quebec City going east, like, no one spoke English whatsoever, and all the towns I was staying in and camping at the time. And so I think that, coupled with being really tired, sleeping on the floor, like on the ground, not getting good sleeps, feeling really isolated in my own country, which is a weird feeling, that, like, on the third or fourth day after Quebec City, I just, throughout the day, I just noticed, like, this growing, like, monster pressure, like, inside of me. And I was about 3/4 way through the ride. No, probably like more than that, like only maybe 20 kilometers away from finishing. And I just had, like, this full blown, like, meltdown on the side of the road that was building all day, but it just was like, I got something, like, switched, and, like, that was a crisis situation. Like, that was, like, completely, like, suicidal thoughts. Like, just, that's all I could think about. I was just trying so hard to deflect them and come back to myself. What do I have to do? How do I take care of myself right now? And it's just like, but it just was coming at me so hard.
Wow.
And yeah, it was really intense. Like, I was not safe, because I was on the side of a road with trucks going by, and I was on my own. And so, and I think about, that was a huge moment for me to learn about managing mental health, because I know we had joked about this over text, but, like, the toolbox, not that we were making fun of it, but, like, that idea of a toolbox, like, in that situation, I remember I had one split second of being like, what does my body need right now? Like, what do I have to do right now? And I just somehow was able to, like, hear some signal being like, just fucking breathe. And I just was like, okay. And I just kept doing it, and my mind would go crazy, and I'd be like, just breathe. And that ultimately is what helped me, like, just kind of go from crisis to, like, really bad. And I ended up I was staying at a family friend's cottage that was empty in this small town in Quebec. And so I made it there, and just kind of, just kind of deflated when I got there, but I made it through. And talking about the toolbox, the strategies we have to take care of ourselves, like, that was a situation when, for those situations, you got to have tools for that sometimes. For some people, not everyone needs stuff like that.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I actually love the fact that you call it a toolbox. And, when I messaged you and I mentioned, a mental health toolbox, and maybe share of some of the things you keep in there, I actually love that, right? Because it's true, right? We should have a mental health toolbox where we can open it up and use those strategies when we need to,
Totally.
right? If it's not a toolbox, we can call it a mental health backpack, anything,
Whatever.
right? I mean, anything, right? That you can relate to. So when you're in a crisis, right, you can actually, think of those things that you need to do that will get you out of that crisis. And I think breathing is a big one, right? My friend actually told me it's impossible to have an anxiety attack, or a panic attack rather, if you can focus on your breathing and slow down your breathing, because, right, physically, that's all it is you need to slow down your breathing. So
yeah, actually, that's an interesting thing, because I mean, a couple of things come up, but just focusing on one or two, that like there's tools like breathing that are great for when I was in a crisis, but it's also good for me every morning to take like 20 breaths, just because it's good for me. So like those strategies that we have aren't necessarily doesn't always meant to be like to fix a state we're in. It's just meant to be like, this is just good for me. It's a good maintenance tool to have. And then the other thing for breathing is like in a really like a situation with a lot of anxiety. Like I had a presentation for work yesterday, and I was just like so worked up and nervous. And it's like, anytime you think about breathing and breathe, you're not thinking about the other stuff. Even if it comes back right away, like the anxiety about whatever you're doing, if you breathe and think about that, then you're not thinking about it for a split second, and that can only be good. Just a little bit of a break. So breathing is just awesome. It's something that I'm learning more and more about.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it's a good point that you bring up, that it's, your toolbox isn't only for state of crisis, but, being proactive in managing your mental health, which, you're definitely good at, and you're advocating, mental health on a daily basis. So you're working with jack.org now, right?
Yeah. So when I finished my ride, I got a job with the Canadian Mental Health Association, which is where I was fundraising. And then it just ended up being, it wasn't a good fit, I guess, for maybe both of us, but I just wasn't enjoying it a ton. And then I always had my eye on jack.org. And so I reached out to their vice president. We had coffee, and I was like, I got to work for this guy, let alone jack.org. But I really connected with him. And so I was a business grad at university, was in sales, and then after my bike ride now, it's like pretty clear to me that like I really want to be making an impact in this space. And I don't know if I'll always stay in it in terms of like working in mental health, but outside of jack.org now, I run a program for people to like dive into this space and build their toolbox and change the relationship with themselves. So the whole ride and the open up experience in general has just opened me up to an idea of like, how do I want to, serve, I guess. Not that like making money is a part of that, but it's a lot of doors have opened up.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, so it's good that you were able, as I mentioned earlier, to turn your, something that you were afraid to talk about, right? Something that could have led you down a really negative path, but your vulnerability and your courage to overcome that by doing something, way out of your comfort zone. What was it? 8,500 kilometers?
No, in total it was 10,000 actually.
10,000. Yeah. 10,000 kilometers. And so you started in April, right?
I started in May, April, like middle of May, and then finished middle of September.
May to September.
But Toronto was like pretty much right, like spot on in the middle. Even though on a map it doesn't quite look like it. But after Toronto, I did so many zigzags around like PEI, around Nova Scotia, around New Brunswick, all the way around Newfoundland. And like when you pull out all those circles and stuff, it's quite long.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I would imagine. I have family out in New Brunswick. Your sister's out in New Brunswick too, right?
No, I have family in Nova Scotia.
I was Nova Scotia. Okay, cool. Yeah. And I mean, we drive out east almost every summer, and it's a long drive, right? We complain about how long of a drive it is. So now, it's going to be a whole new perspective when I'm driving. I'm never going to complain again.
Just do it in one go.
I'm just going to tell my fiance, listen, Ryan rode his bike out here. We cannot complain. We're in a car. So honestly though, it's such an amazing story. I've been telling people about it for the past couple of weeks, right? I'm going to be chatting with Ryan. This guy rode his bike across Canada for mental health, right? It's such an incredible story, man. I absolutely love it.
Appreciate that.
And yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on and talking to me. And, I wish we could kind of go into more details about it, but I'm sure we'll chat. And I'm sure you've got some incredible stories about these months there. But you raised a lot of money along the way, all right? And then I do want to mention one thing. So you stopped in different provinces, and you actually shared your story on, on news outlets and on platforms through CAMH and such. So what was that? Was that like a lot of pressure for you to go through this physical endeavor and then stop and then have to regroup and then go through spill your guts and your emotions publicly?
Yeah,
What was that like?
yeah. Um, it was really hard at first. Like sharing my story in front of people was extremely draining to the point where like I would actually like struggle afterwards because of it, because of how like emotionally draining it was. I knew I
Yeah.
was like doing like I was happy about what I was doing. Um, but yeah, I mean, there was a time in Saskatchewan I biked. It was like the hardest day ever because there was wind in my face the whole day, and I got to Regina. And the next day, I was speaking at Canadian Mental Health Association branch in Regina, and they had like a bunch of it was a more community focused one. So a lot of the people in the community came out to use their
Nice.
services to their to their building, and I did a talk. And like I remember being in the car. My mom had like flown out and met me at that point, and I was just like fully depressed, like going into that. Like I was in the
Jeez.
car just being like, how am I going to do this? She's like, Ryan, like just be you. Like that's all you have to do right now, is because like I'm only sharing my story. I'm not like sharing some science project. I don't have to
Yeah,
remember anything. And
it's a good way to
so,
look at it. Yeah.
but for me, like the whole public speaking and sharing has, over the past 2 years now, like at the beginning, it was very draining on me and very, very taxing. But now I would say it's fueling for me, because just like I think I can tap into myself, like my truth, I guess, a little bit easier, and still have to be prepared, but it's not quite the same anymore, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely. And then so you've raised I read 180,000 since 2018.
Yeah, so that bike
Jeez.
ride raised 125 or so, like the one across Canada, and then ever since then I've been doing fundraisers, raising money. So I organized a mountain bike race, and that raised 8,000, and then this year I did I, sorry, last summer I did two, and then this summer I did another one with Jack.org, and so collectively all of those have added up to about
Wow.
185. So yeah, I mean, who
That's
knows what?
amazing.
Like maybe I'll hit like $1 million. Not that I care about a number whatsoever. It's just more of like every year, how can I chip in?
Yeah, and you're making an impact, right? And that's why it's incredible to, take on this challenge to help others, right? It's such a selfless act. And, because a lot of people might think that, well, in a lot of scenarios, people will do things to the benefit of themselves. But there wasn't really a benefit to you to to get on a bike and put yourself through that pain and open up and be vulnerable and spill your guts and go through that. Maybe once you're done, right, you feel that sense of accomplishment. But it's incredible, right? And you've made a huge impact, and the money that you raise goes towards good programs. And the fact that I mentioned earlier, you're still at jack.org, and you're working towards mental health. And do you find, I'm curious to find though, like when you're working in the field of mental health, do you find it challenging to that always being on the forefront? Because
Yeah,
I found for myself that's something that I remember like a couple years ago when I took a break from social media. I was out there and I was promoting mental health, and I found that I was so involved in it that it sort of started affecting my mental health by talking about it all the time, right?
yeah. I think it would, maybe my opinion is that it depends on the role you take on within the mental health space. When I was working at Canadian Mental Health Association, I was speaking a lot. Like I built my story, and so that was a little bit more of an emotional investment
Yeah.
and like a personal emotional investment. But now at Jack.org, like my job is all about corporate fundraising, corporate partnerships, and I don't really share my story a ton. Like I'd be happy to, but it's about Jack.org and sharing,
Yeah.
Canada's youth stories and stuff like that. So I think it helps when there's not quite as much of a personal investment, my story, my emotions in it. That's just
Yeah.
my perspective. But because I love my job, like I absolutely love my job, because I think it's a job I love, even if I wasn't doing. No, I don't know if I would say that. I love the job because it's business, and
Yeah.
I love the relationships, the pitching, proposals, stuff like that. but I also know it's for a great cause and I can be myself there. So
That's
those all
amazing.
things combined, it's good.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, well, maybe we'll put together an event sometime, and
There you go.
yeah, it'll be cool, right? A little tournament
Get
or
you on a
something.
bike.
Yeah, maybe a basketball tournament or something like that, or a little 3-on-3 tournament, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because I've actually been looking at the Bruce Trail from Niagara to Tobermory,
How far is that?
900 kilometers.
Yeah. That's
So I
huge.
mean, it's huge to walk, to hike, right? So because I mean, if you go on a 10K hike, it's usually about an hour and a half, 2 hours, right? If you're just strolling along. So if you do the math, right? I mean, you could probably do it in, I don't know, 3 weeks if you did about 40 or 50K a day. 50K a day walking, I don't know, that's
It's
pretty
huge.
tough, right? So,
And it's also not like on a sidewalk. Like it's
yeah,
a lot
that's
of times it's like it's single track in the forest. Like it's yeah. I mean, I think it's an incredible challenge.
yeah,
A good friend of mine is talking about. He wants to do it, but just anyone can do it. I mean, you just gotta prepare and
gotta prepare
dedicate
for it.
time.
Yeah, I know some people are doing end to end, so you could actually pick certain sections of the trail.
Yeah,
So you can, like Niagara, for example, the Niagara section, you can do it in a weekend. I believe it's 82 kilometers in length. So you can do it, 40 and 40. It'd still be tough, right?
yeah.
You'll be sore on the Monday, right?
Oh
But
yeah.
but I mean, you can do like end to end and then eventually do the whole trail. But it'd be cool to, start on one end and just go all the way
Oh,
through, right?
totally.
So
That'd be an
hey, if you
incredible experience.
if you're up for it, man, let me know. We'll plan it, right? Even if it's in a couple of years.
I don't know. Hiking just isn't really connecting with me at this point. Maybe in the
Okay.
future.
Okay. That's funny. Hey, I figured you have some experience, right? So you'd be a good guy to bring
I
along,
could help
right?
you like prep or something, but
Okay.
or
Hey, I
cheer you on. I'll
appreciate
cheer
that.
you on. I'll drive up to Tobermory.
All right, that's cool. Yeah, man. And I actually read, like, I was actually seriously looking into it, and they have a warning on their website saying that the trail is not suitable for like to actually camp like throughout the entire trail. You do have to exit and find like an Airbnb or whatever. So you can't camp the entire way. So at least that's a perk, right? So if I
It
do
could be
decide to
done.
do
It
it,
could be done for sure. You
yeah,
could definitely be able to. I think you could.
yeah, I could
You
pull it
could
off. I
definitely
could,
make it work. Yeah.
yeah, you can step out of the trail, jump in
Get a
an
hammock.
Airbnb.
Have one of
Yeah,
those
or
camping hammocks. Like
yeah.
no shortage of trees on the trail.
So what were your sleeping accommodations when you were on your journey? Did you camp most of the time? Camp in motels or
No, I would say I mostly did motels most of the time.
hotels?
It was like my vision of the trip was to be camping like every night. That's just kind of how I thought it was going to go. And then, as I said, like I wasn't really in a great spot mentally, like fully
Mm-hmm.
stable per se, going into that ride. And so my psychiatrist at the time suggested that until I get to Toronto, which would be 2 months of biking, that I just play it safe. Because if I'm on the middle of the highway, in like the prairies, no one's around, get into a crisis situation, then, you know, I want to make sure that like I can sleep in a bed and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, get some good
So
rest. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Because
and so yeah,
you spend some nights camping though, where you
yeah.
didn't have a
Sorry,
choice.
yeah,
Yeah,
I was gonna get
right.
to that. So yeah, so the deal was with my parents, like if I make it to Toronto, then I can grab my camping stuff. So then I
Okay.
camped. I camped from like Toronto up to Ottawa, Ottawa to Montreal. I stayed with someone in Montreal. Then and then yeah, and then Montreal. After that, I stayed in a hotel in Trois-Rivières, and then Quebec City, and then camped for a few days after that. But honestly, like that breakdown I was talking about in Quebec, like that's because I just wasn't sleeping well. Like I wasn't resting, and
Yeah.
sleep might be the most important part of my
So,
mental health management, which I didn't realize at the time. And so
yeah.
I was just constantly setting myself up for failure, like pretty much any time I camped. So it was a pretty like tough thing to get over from an ego perspective because I thought I should be doing it, like should. But ultimately, it wasn't right for me. So I had to just kind of push that aside and focus on what was going to be best. So
Definitely.
yeah, I didn't camp a ton, but I'm kind of I don't really. I'm not too ashamed of it anymore. I mean, you got to do what's
No.
best for your body.
No, absolutely. No, there's nothing wrong with that. So, I mean, no, like I was surprised that you camped at all, to be honest with you. When I saw that you were actually camping, I was like, oh my God, this guy's sleeping in a tent tonight. I feel bad, right? Because I mean, like you're riding 150 kilometers a day, right? And that's day after day after day. And then to sleep on the floor, it's just incredible. Like I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine doing
Sometimes
that.
the beds, I feel like in the motels I stayed in probably weren't much better than the ground.
Yeah, exactly. You said some crummy motels too, right?
Oh
So
my God.
I'm sure you're happy to just find that, find that bed and just
There were some
crash, right?
times I'm like, I wouldn't, you can't really, it's hard to plan ahead because you never know what's going to happen with the weather or you're going to get injured. So you just kind of take it like a day or two in advance, no matter where I was in the country.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes I'd be like, okay, where am I staying tonight? Like looking at my phone over breakfast, it's like, there's one option. And so if they don't have a room, like I'm really fucked.
Yeah.
And that happened in Cape Breton. Like I went around the Cabot Trail and there's like very select few accommodations around there. And if they're not available, then you're screwed.
Yeah.
But I can't call ahead a week before and say I'm going to be there that night because I just may not be. Like I may not make it there in time.
Yeah.
So yeah, wow. I look back on it now. I'm like, I got really lucky. Like I didn't have to sleep, in the bush.
Yeah, for sure. And with the bears, right? Yeah. In the bush with the bears. So yeah, Cabot Trail is a beautiful area. I actually drove through there a couple of summers ago in Nova Scotia. It's Cape Breton. Yeah, it's beautiful there, man. That's awesome.
Totally.
That's cool. Hey, awesome. So yeah, like I said, so you sort of inspired me to embark on my journey to hike the Bruce Trail. So if I do end up doing that, right, I will definitely raise some money for mental health and
true. Amazing.
Yeah, because personally, I find that one of my outlets is getting out and hiking and even going out for walks, right? That's been the way that I sort of deal with my emotions, and because you can't go to the beach every day, right? If it's a crappy day. I love the beach. I love hiking. Those are my things, right? And those are in my toolbox. Yeah. Right? Along with, like you said, proper sleep, nutrition, exercising and having meaningful conversations, right? I preach that all the time. So
totally.
So I think it's cool, man. Hey, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, Ryan.
Yeah, man, this is wonderful. It's great chat. Awesome, I hope we can keep in touch too, and hope you follow through on that adventure you want to do.
Yeah, man. I was actually thinking of doing the end-to-end in Niagara next weekend. I told my fiance yesterday, I was like, hey, you down to do it? I'm like, you down to do it with me next weekend? She's like, I don't know. It's like 40 kilometers Saturday, 40 kilometers Sunday. I'm like, we got this.
Just do it. Don't even think twice about it.
I love it. I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted.
Yes, please.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. Love what you're doing and looking forward to your future projects, man.
Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate it.
All right. All the best. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Be the Light podcast. Ryan's a true inspiration. I feel inspired. I don't know about you. I feel like I can put my running shoes on right now and go hike the Bruce Trail and keep going until I reach Tobermory from Niagara. I want to thank you again for the likes, commenting and sharing your thoughts. Again, your feedback is always appreciated. Please share this podcast. And until next time, remember to fear less, love more, and always have hope.